case has never been about race, nor has it ever been about the right to bear arms, not in the sense of proving this as a criminal case. But Trayvon Martin was profiled. There is no doubt that he was profiled to be a criminal. And if race was one of the aspects in George Zimmerman's mind, then we believe that we put out the proof necessary to show that Zimmerman did profile Trayvon Martin. But the right to bear arms is a right in which we all believe. I especially believe in that right. What we want is responsible use when someone feels they have to use a gun to take a life.
Well, the verdict is in. George Zimmerman found not guilty by a panel of his peers, but the ruling has angered some self-described civil rights leaders who insist the case was indeed all about race.
Here with her reaction this morning is lawyer, conservative columnist, and the author of the book Mugged. Ann Coulter joins us on the couch this morning. Ann, nice to see you this morning.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I mean, your response to seeing Miss Corey there, talk about Miss Corey there, in her response to this was race-based.
Like the much of the commentary I've seen on the case, it had absolutely nothing to do with the evidence presented at trial. We're still hearing about the hoodie. There is no evidence that race had anything to do with this. And by the way, it is not a crime for a private individual to engage in any kind of profiling. It is not against the law for an individual to follow another individual. Yet and still, there was no evidence for that. There was no evidence that the hoodie had anything to do with it, and we're still hearing about the hoodie.
Where were you when you heard the verdict read last night, and what was your response?
I was at a restaurant. We all knew it was coming with a bunch of my friends. We listened to it live on our iPhones, and I tweeted out hallelujah, because this was a media-led mob, and an innocent man almost went to prison for 30 years because of, well, Al Sharpton, stirring up hatred and creating a narrative for which there was never any evidence, and after this long trial, there is still never any evidence. What George Zimmerman said happened. The evidence only supported that. There is certainly no evidence that he stalked someone, that he tracked him down, that he picked him out either because he was black or because he was wearing a hoodie. We have the 911 call. Oh, and he has a lawsuit against NBC for editing that 911 call to make it sound like it was race. He was asked, he saw someone walking suspiciously, wandering about in the rain as George Zimmerman was on his way to Target. He was on neighborhood watch. He wasn't on a patrol, and according to CBS News, he turns down being on a patrol for the neighborhood. No, their job was, as many people who live in neighborhoods where there have been lots of crimes, is just to watch and call the police when you see something. Yeah, maybe following Trayvon Martin in the sense of being able to tell the police he went that way. And again, it's not illegal. And that's what he was doing, and he was jumped. And the evidence is he was jumped, he was hit first, Trayvon was on top of him, and yet we still keep hearing, well, who's to say he just tracked this young child down and gunned him down? There is no evidence for that. This case never should have been brought. It is purely political for the media to continue their narrative of all of America as Mississippi burning. They want to keep us divided by race, ginned up by race, and it's a relief that someone who was innocent did not have to be the sacrificial lamb for this media narrative about America as being run by the Klan.
But are you surprised by how little has changed? I mean, you're describing something that's gone on my entire life. It's been 60 years since the civil rights movement began, and yet you'd never know that in the press. But I thought the election of Barack Obama, even if I wasn't for it, I wasn't for it, but I thought, you know, at least we're moving past this one stage in American history into something new and better in race relations, and it turns out that's not true.
No, in fact, I mean, this is exactly what my last book is about, Mugged, Racial Demagoguery from the 70s to Obama. And the thesis of my book is, as I go through cases much like this, mostly in New York City, you know, famous for being that big Jim Crow state. There was never any segregation in New York, and yet every few months in New York, in a case often led by Al Sharpton, often a cop would be accused of basically what George Zimmerman was accused of, and a big hoo-ha and headlines, and oh, the Klan's on the New York City police force. And then the facts would eventually come out, and you'd find out, oh no, the black kid was mugging the cop. I think it ended, and this is the thesis of my book, right after the O.J. verdict. At that moment, when a mostly black jury, 100% Democrat, by the way, found a spectacularly guilty black celebrity not guilty of murder, white America just said, that's it, we are shutting down the white guilt bank. And we had peace for a decade. You will notice you didn't have cases like this for about 10 years after OJ. For the first time, the prosecutor, Steve Pagonis, who was falsely accused of raping Tawana Brawley, it was about a decade after he brought his defamation suit against Sharpton and the rest of them. It wasn't until the OJ verdict that he got his day in court and he got paid. Obama brought it all back because the liberal media needs this Mississippi burning narrative in order to promote the black president with his liberal policies, which is what they care about. But at least it isn't brought fully back because George Zimmerman was found not guilty.
I mean, I think that the facts of this case, obviously when the facts came out, it got much more complicated. But at first blush, let's remember that for 46 days before he was arrested, all we knew was that an unarmed black teenager with Skittles had been shot by a wannabe cop. Once, I maintain that had the police department released the photos of George Zimmerman's bloodied face and bloodied head, we wouldn't even have gotten to that point. But they didn't until after he was arrested.
Yes, but you wouldn't have had. I mean, the reason we thought that was because the media was lying to us by doctoring photos of George Zimmerman, by doctoring...
Were they doctoring photos?
Yeah.
Or that we just didn't have those photos yet?
No, I think that's the accusation.
Which photos?
There's a lawsuit.
Document. I mean, were doctored.
Of,
back of his head.
Of his head, yeah. Making it look like he had no injuries. And they doctored the 911 tape.
And the audio tape.
Where the 911 operator is asking him, what race is he? I think he's black. What is he wearing? He's wearing a hoodie.
And this gets took out the questions,
yeah.
Just the answers they glued together.
He looks suspicious. He's black. It's shocking, except that, as you say, we went through it throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and I think people have had enough of this. It is not good for the country. It is especially not good for black people to treat them like infants and not hold them accountable for their actions. And, oh, well, they might riot. No.
Is it good for liberals, though?
Acceptable.
I mean, because the president just doesn't hold a press conference and just decide off the cuff to make this comment, right? It's everything is vetted and thought about. And his comments, when he made that comment about him looking like his own son, if he were to have a son, it seemed like it was planted, thought about. Somebody in the administration said, this is a good idea. Go out there, at a microphone, and say this.
Absolutely political, because, as Tucker just said, and by the way, this was an argument made publicly in newspapers when Dinkins was running for office, even on the first time, even if Giuliani would make a better mayor, we have to vote for Giuliani to help race relations in the city, because enough white people will think, if we just make a black man president, it will all go away. You know, if we just allow Steve Pagonis or this cop or this person falsely accused of racism, they'll be our sacrificial lambs, and that'll be the end of it. It's never the end of it. You have to say, no, this is not fair. This is not the truth.
Ann Coulter, lawyer, fascinating insight this morning on this case. Thank you so much for joining us.
And author of Mugged.
Yes, which is will explain this case.
You wrote it even before it, but it still explains it. Thanks so much, Ann.